Hi everyone, in this video I am going to fully assemble, fix, improve and paint my very first 135 scale figure. About a year and a half ago I ordered this figure from a certain well-known Chinese website. For a long time I wanted to create a really good, high-quality diorama dedicated to the STALKER universe, because it's one of my all-time favorite video game. So after picking out this particular figure, I decided to modify it in a way that would make it stand out. I didn't want to just build another one of those standard models that YouTube is flooded with. You know, the same pose, holding a stick in one hand and an assault rifle in the other. Honestly, it's nothing new. Instead, I decided to make a rocky stalker who's gone fishing. Yeah, fishing in the zone. Of course, before I could even start making the model properly, as you might have already noticed, I had to remove all the unnecessary parts. Unfortunately, this model arrived in pretty bad condition. There were lots of excess blobs of resin, melted-looking pieces, bent or twisted parts of the gas mask, and other odd defects that I had to carefully cut away using my hobby knife. After that, I started my modification project. First of all, I made the fishing rod. I made this model from a piece of leftover plastic sprue. I also used sprue to make the reel for this fishing rod, but for the fishing line I used a thin piece of real fishing thread. And with that, my fishing rod was done. It's looking good. Then it was time to start painting. But first, of course, the model needed a primer coat. For priming, I used black acrylic color from ICM. Yes, I know using acrylic paint as a primer isn't the best idea, but in this situation I mixed the paint with ultra matte varnish, which helps it stick much better to the model's surface. This time I decided to use a very matte primer, so model would have deep dark shadows. Since it's a 135 figure, it's also much easier to work with an airbrush. For the first main color, I used Vallejo's Panzer XS Highlight German Tank Crew 1. Yo! Spraying it lightly from above allowed me to apply a lighter tone while keeping the primer shadows intact. After that, I mixed a little green into the paint. Soviet chemical protection coat have a greenish-blue tint. So by adding some green and layering it over the base color, I got the perfect Soviet-era chemical suit shade. Following this technique, I ended up with something like this. When the paint was fully dry, I moved on to painting the details, starting with the backpack, known as the colobok. Yeah, that's actually what this old backpack is called. Since it's a vintage army item, it needed to have an olive green tone. So for the base color I used Vallejo's US Olive Green. Nothing complicated here, I just painted the entire backpack and its straps in this olive tone. Then, to give it some variation, I added a little bit of Dectan from Vallejo and used it to highlight all the raised edges. This way the darker olive worked as a shadow, while the olive mixed with the Dectan picked out the details and made the backpack pop. There was also a small mic attached to the backpack. I painted it with Vallejo Shadow Flash from the Panzer XS series. After that I added some white dot texture using Dectan. I think it looks quirky, maybe even a little surreal, which somehow feels right for the Chernobyl zone. Next I worked a bit on the gas mask. The filter got the same olive color as the backpack, while the mask itself was painted in Dectan mixed with a light grey, also from Vallejo. After that, I moved back to the chemical suit to paint the special clips used to fasten it. For this, I took the base color I would use for the coat and added a bit more olive to get the shade I wanted. The same mix was used for the front fasteners that act as buttons. Once the model was completely dry, it was time to start highlighting the coat. Because I would preserve the shadows from the primer and apply the base color carefully, I could now safely and weathering using the dry brush technique. And it would only make the model better. This Soviet coat has a rubberized texture, and on all the folds and raised edges it tends to show worn rubber highlights, so my choice of dry brushing was spot on. The color which I used for this work was heavily tinted dictan, so the effect wouldn't be too bright. When that was done, I added shadows around the backpack straps. Technique exactly the same as I showed in my video with painting 1/72 figures, which you can find in the link in the corner. At this point, the figure looked like this, meaning it was time to move on to more details. The first of these was painting the Kalashnikov rifle. Simple enough. For the wooden parts I used chocolate brown and pale brown, and for the metal I used just black. All these colors was from ICM. As you might have already noticed, I painted the wooden part of the fish and rod with the same colors, while the reel was painted shadow flash to give some nice contrast. The fishing line was painted dictan to give it volume and the right tone. And when all this was done, I moved on to the weathering. Using dry brushing again, I added scratches and wear to the weapon. Honestly, it didn't turn out perfectly. The model quality wasn't the best and it broke on me several times while I was working. I couldn't even glue it together properly in some spots, but I let it slide. After all, this is supposed to be a rookie stalker. His gear is rough, old and beaten up, so a battered AK actually fits the character. At this stage, I could say the model was almost finished. I using a brush and heavily tinted paint to add dirt. Since the coat hangs low, splashes of mud would naturally hit it, so I applied them in that area. The result looked pretty good to me, and if I like it, that means we can keep going. The next detail was a massive Soviet Geiger counter. Since this is a rookie stalker, his equipment is bulky and not exactly suited for the zone. Definitely not the kind of gear an experienced stalker would carry. So I figured out a big old, painted in ICM yellow Geiger counter would add some nice extra detail to the model. Yeah, some detail of this Geiger counter look not so good, but this is just additional detail, and I think it plays the role perfectly. And since our stalker is heading out fishing, how could he go without a bucket to keep his catch? So I printed a bucket on my 3D printer. The handle was made from thin plastic, which I stretched and shaped by heating a sprue over a lighter. All this model I painted in grey color by ICM and used a sponge technique and dictan color to add wear and tear. Then I attached all this detail to the model, or more precisely to lower part of the backpack. And that's how the finished figures turned out. I can say it's an absolutely perfect model. There is still room for improvement, but for my first 1/35 scale figure I think it turned out pretty well. I think it's going to be a great addition to my future diorama with BTR, sitting in the Chernobyl zone. And that's end of this video. A huge thank you for watching, and also to my dear supporters on Patreon. There is only one of you for now, but I truly appreciate every bit of support you give me. Much respect. As always, you can find all useful links in video description. Links on my Patreon, links on my Cults 3D, where you can find very good 3D model for your dioramas and figures, and some useful video about painting figures or creating some additional details. As always, this has been Vlad from the No Quality Dioramas. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.